When I was in 10th grade back in 1980, many moon ago, it was about 1980, that year I decided, prior to that, my dad or my mom would take me, or both of them, not at the same time, would take me Christmas shopping for the other one. And they would give me the money to buy them what they told me I should be buying. That was before they had the little stores set up in elementary schools where you get what you get. I can remember when Chris and Isaiah and Lila were all three going to a Christian school, they had this store set up and they would go in and they would get so much money to spend, and I would get the most cheesy things in the world. But you don't say to your kid, "Oh, this is really cheesy," when they picked it out for you. So you get it and you put it right there on top of everything until they're not looking a couple days later, and then you dispose of that little plastic grasshopper. Isaiah always got me insects for some reason, I don't know. But when I was in 10th grade, back in 1980, I had decided that I knew what I wanted to give to both of my parents that year. And so I went out to the local Jamesway. I had a dime, so I called somebody that cared, and I went to Jamesway, and I began to shop. And I was shopping for the Presto Air Popcorn Maker. Remember, it had the little yellow bottom of it, and this one was a top of the line that you could melt a butter on top of it. Yeah. But I didn't have enough money. My parents didn't give me allowance because they said the chores I should be doing anyway. As my dad would say, your allowance is your eating and sleeping, and you have clothes. That's your allowance. And so, what we got lunch money. And so I saw that, and I decided, well, I want this. So I picked it up, and I carried it back to the layaway department. And I paid my deposit on it, and then for the next several weeks, I paid a little bit each time until a couple days before Christmas, I was able to go and pay off that Presto Air Popcorn Maker that melted the butter on top of it. And I took it home, and with my great wrapping skills that I still display today, and possessed today, wrapped it up and put it under the Christmas tree for my mom and my dad. Trends come and go, don't they? Trends come and go. Everything old is eventually new again. Ties are one of those things. Now I'm still waiting for those ties that have the flat bottom, the cloth type ties to come back in. At one time ties were real thin, then they got real thick, and then they got thin again, and now they got thick again. Paisley was in, Paisley's out. You know how it goes. Trends come and go, and then they seem to come back again. Before the days of where 5-year-olds could get a credit card, there was this thing that retailers did. It was a system of buying that you could buy something even if you couldn't afford it by laying it away, like I did with that Presto Air popcorn machine that melted the butter on top. Even though if you couldn't afford it all at once, you could take it back and to the department and you could lay it away. It didn't matter if the item was a $25 sweater or a $2,500 engagement ring. You could chip away at the balance as long as it took. And still, although you had your purchase, you didn't really have it. You had visitation rights to see it, but you couldn't take it home with you. Then credit cards began to be issued to everybody and a brother. And the system of buying in the mid to late 80s began to change. And everybody started charging everything on their credit card instead of laying it away, and the layaways went away. Then 2008 happened, and purchase power began to change. It became problematic, and the ritual of layaway was reborn again. And even today, you can go to stores like Walmart and Burlington Coat Factory and Marshalls and TJ Maxx and Toys R Us, and you can lay things away under that old system, which, if you ask me, is a better system than buying something on credit and then paying it after you already have it at home. You don't get to take it home till it's paid off. A layaway system encourages us to get what we want, but we have to wait for it. It's yours, but it's not all yours yet. Advent is the church's version of a layaway plan. Advent is a church's version of a layaway plan. During the 24 days of preparation, we take steps. We make personal deposits and ritual commitments to a promise, to an almost but not yet gift that we anxiously await. But while we wait and watch, we still live in the reality of a promise. And that promise is that we inhabit a world that is fractured and flawed, but yet delivered. We still face illness and death. We still struggle against hatreds and prejudices. And we still deal with abuses of power and the vulnerabilities that powerlessness brings. But you know what? For people of faith, the here and now is packed with hope and promise. Faith in the reality of the coming Emmanuel, God with us. And in God's continuing withness, not witness, but withness, it makes a layaway living in a now but not yet world a ritual of daily deposits into a layaway plan. Daily deposits into a layaway plan. We lay away our riches in heaven, not on earth where moss and rust destroy, but in heaven. And we can rejoice in the treasures of God's witness every single day. The prophets who spoke to the Hebrews and the Hebrew people during the generations of defeat and exile knew about living a life on the layaway plan. Their messages always laid down both judgment and hope. As you would read through the major and minor prophets in Scripture, when a prophecy came, a lot of times there was judgment that came with that, but there was always a hope in giving that prophecy. God's wrath and God's pardon. Howling reconstruction rules and heartfelt redemptive plans that God brought to people. Like we'll see in Isaiah chapter 40, if you'll follow along with me in Isaiah chapter 40, beginning with verse 1. Isaiah 40, verse 1. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. A voice says, cry. And I said, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, and the flower fades, but the breath of the Lord blows on it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of God will stand forever. Get you up high on the mountain, O Zion, herald of good news. Lift up your voice with strength, O Jerusalem, herald of good news. Lift up, fear not. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Behold, the Lord God comes with might, and his arm rules for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him. He will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom and gently lead those that are with young. Gently lead the mothers that are with young. In this story, the words of Isaiah, they're a symphony to souls that are weary, souls that are weighed down and wounded and exiled like the Israelites. Finally, instead of rebukes and reprimands for all their misbehavior, there comes another sound, a song of redemption, as Isaiah says, comfort my people. Say to your God, speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her welfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. The prophet's message is one that offers real hope and real-time relevance to the people of Israel. But also that message offers real-time hope to us through the years. Yet it also points to a way in the future that is greater than the faithfulness that can even be imagined. What Isaiah's prophecy highlights is the difference between living a life that languishes in despair. Despair of God's seeming absence versus living a life of luxury in the reality of God's presence. Even in the midst of a messy, mixed up world. At first, Isaiah's prophecy, as we see in Isaiah 40, at first his prophecy doesn't sound promising, does it? All people are grass? We're all grass. The grass withers, the flower fades when the breath of the Lord blows upon it. Surely all people are grass, he says. To the exiled Israelites living under the heel of Babylon and constantly being harassed and humiliated by Babylonian gods, this message is one of comfort to them. The prophecy affirms that all human principalities and powers will eventually wither away like grass. Only God's power and God's presence, folks. Only God's presence and God's power are constant in this world. Isaiah says the word of the Lord will stand forever. The word of the Lord will stand forever. In verse 10, Isaiah affirms the Lord comes with might and his arm rules for him. God is in control and God is coming to deliver his people. That's a prophecy and a promise to the Hebrew people and the Israelite people of Isaiah's day, and it's a promise and prophecy to us today. But in the face of the not yet layaway reality in which the faithful are living, and we're living that time, Isaiah's message also declares an ongoing presence of divine compassion. Not only is God large and in charge, but God is tender and caring and loving. These words are an exquisite poetry that can make the reader cry. He says, he will gather the lambs in his arms. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom and gently lead those that are with young. It's tender and caring and loving. God is not only the only God of the universe, the God who will wipe away the terror of the Babylonian principalities and pretenders, but God is the one who deeply loves and cares for the faithful and is present with them eternally, whatever their circumstances. God's arm both rules, and his arm, God also carries lambs and cares for them. It rules and it cares. The season of Advent is not Christmas. Listen, the season of Advent is not Christmas. The promised one is not yet come. For those who are expecting the arrival of Emmanuel, this is not the season of celebration and merriment. Advent is a time to watch and wait, folks. It's a time to watch and wait, to point at and prepare. It's a time to reboot and realign our faith to the reality that we still live in a world of not now but not yet. A world of now but not yet. The story of Christmas is, it's kind of like being asked this question. You want the good news first or the bad news first? The good news but first or the bad news first? The good news, of course, is that God is already present. God is already here as we focus on Advent. He's already here redeeming and reconciling. The bad news, of course, is that the world is still the world, and we still have to live in it. Advent is when we most purposefully bring together, swirl together those two opposing realities and the new composition of faith. That God is here, but we're still in this world. And you know what that means? That means that we must avoid the temptation to SOS Advent. To SOS Advent. To change the message to the world. We don't want to give a Hallmark version of Christmas. Now, I realize some of you might like those Hallmark Christmas movies. If you've watched one, you've seen them all. Because mainly it's the same characters wearing a different shirt. It's like me at Trader Joe's, or not Trader Joe, well, Trader Joe's or Costco or Sam's Club. It's like me and Isaiah when we go there, Hallmark movies like that, because we go there and we go up to one of the places and they have those cheesecakes that are so good. And they give you such a tiny little piece. And we walk around and we trade hats. And we go back and get our second freebie. And then we go around and we put our hats in our back pockets so they don't see it. Then we go back around with our shirts inside out. Then we make faces. No, we don't go back that many times as far as you know. But we Christians tend to SOS Christmas. It sanitizes Christmas. We sanitize it when we take the Hallmark version to it. That's the first S, sanitize. It also makes the Christmas story orderly. That's the O in SOS. And it spiritualizes. That's the second S. The gift of Emmanuel came down at Christmas. When that gift came down at Christmas, it was not sanitary. It was not orderly and strictly spiritual. Advent is a time to prepare for an event that is messy, disorderly, and grubbily physical. SOS, sanitize. The birth of Jesus is hardly sanitary. Birth is a messy, messed up biological thing that goes on. In every way, Jesus' birth reflects the fragility of human life and the tenuous ties to this broken world. political, social, and economic realities were necessitated Joseph and Mary going to Bethlehem, traveling to Bethlehem for a census, a bean counter moment when Mary shouldn't have been going anywhere. She should have been staying put. Showing up late on that Super Bowl Sunday meant that there was nowhere for Mary and Joseph to stay. We know the story. There was nowhere for them to stay. Even as their labor pangs were progressing, Jesus was not born into the arms of an extended family, warmly hugging and accepting them. But he was born into the grubbiness of an animal pen, with only Mary and maybe a midlife there with Mary. The world Jesus entered was a world that we live in, a world of inequity, a world of hardship, a world of isolation, a world of filth. That is not sanitary. SOS, orderly, one of the strangest, hottest trends this Christmas I've seen, and I've seen it on different social media and on the internet, is the upside down Christmas tree. Anybody see that? The upside down Christmas tree. Now, some of these inverted Christmas trees go for as much as $1,000. They're already lit, they're already decorated, and they come upside down with the star at the bottom and the bottom at the top. An inverted tree. Now, people may look at that and go, wow, that's just weird. And yeah, it is weird. But you know what? When Emmanuel, God's witness, came, it turned the world upside down. For a Christian, when we see that inverted tree, it should remind us that when Jesus came, it took what was going on at that time and what would happen for the rest of time and turned it upside down. That changed everything around. And it should remind us that as Christians, we should be turning the world upside down because of Emmanuel. SOS. Spiritualize. It's far too easy to spiritualize Christmas. Far too easy to spiritualize Christmas, to make it a seasonal flash in the pan of cozy, warm, and fuzzy feelings. And we've done something to make somebody else's life a little bit easier at the time, something good to others. And then after the season's over, we go back to life as usual. But the birth of Jesus was not a spiritual moment. Listen to me for a second. It was not a spiritual moment. It was the furthest thing from a spiritual moment. Jesus was called Emmanuel. We know that means God with us. Jesus was born in a stable on earth with humans and animals and straw and dirt. This was not a spiritual moment, but this was a moment when God was with us in the most fully intimate and human way. It was the incarnation where God became man. In Jesus' birth, we are brought the delivering presence and ongoing incarnation of God with us. The story of Jesus is not one of saving our souls. The story of Jesus is one of saving all of us, not just our souls. This is a story that's bigger than any Super Bowl. We need to get it right. It's bigger than any Olympics. We need to get it right. It's bigger than any Hollywood movie star or rock star. We need to get it right. We live, Christian, we live on a layaway plan. We can live on that layaway plan. And very shortly, we'll be able to take that home. Go tell it on the mountain that Emmanuel is come. That God with us is come. Go tell it on the mountain that there is a dawn to our darkness. Only trust the star of Bethlehem. It'll take you to Emmanuel.